Not everyone realizes that like the basis of CrossFit is nutrition.
Most people's goals are also just mimetic desires. So it's like they go to a gym, they don't know.
What does that even mean?
Mimetic desire. So it's kind of like
don't worry, I'm looking it up.
I mean, how many gyms out there aren't doing those, setting those expectations on the whiteboard? How many coaches in the average CrossFit gym you go to aren't going through like, hey, this is the Metcon today. Guys, I want this to be crispy and smooth.
That's why I enjoy some of these outsourced programs, because they offer all that that like a lot of gyms aren't built to understand, but should be teaching.
It's all intensity, and there's no understanding that it's relative. And like what a
lot of those are like,
it's pseudo. Yeah.
The best way to be able to get people to actually perform at high intensities is to simplify as much as possible or as needed for that individual.
Performance doesn't always mean like I deadlifted more than I deadlifted a month ago. It could be, I can get up off the ground and don't feel like shit anymore.
Right. Performance could be, I picked up my 4-year-old grandchild.
The goal is to build confidence in our athletes so they want to come back. And like, I can't tell you how many times like that isn't accounted for in other facilities sometimes.
So let's talk gyms, guys. Like, what kind of gyms does everybody have? So we have some perspective.
We'll start with me, I guess.
Yeah.
2 gyms. CrossFit gym, and we do semi-private, so group classes and semis, and then a PT studio inside of a tennis club. It's always a fun, it is dope. It's pretty awesome. I'm excited for where that thing's gonna like grow to.
Are your coaches required to wear sweaters over their shoulders?
No, but like it is a nicer, they do have like really nice clothes and like really nice setup with all that stuff. Where like it is like top tier.
All right.
Yeah.
Derek, how about you?
I would consider it strength conditioning facility. Started out 10 years CrossFit. Officially made the switch probably 5 years ago. And now we offer large group, small group training, some would consider semi-private, and then personal training.
So full de-affiliation?
Full de-affiliation, yeah. We walked the line for a good 2 or 3 years. And I would argue that we've probably always done things a bit different than the status quo of like the traditional CrossFit gym. But yeah, it's fully made that transition.
I feel like in that world, you have to, like, it's black or white. You're either affiliated or you're not. You're either CrossFit affiliate and doing things, or if you're going to move that way, you got to go all the way out because like it's too much confusion.
There was definitely the unapologetic CrossFit group for a while.
You get stuck with them and they're hard to manage. Well, yeah, we'll get into that.
We'll dive into all that, yeah.
So
Matt, what about you?
Mine's a CrossFit gym, but I'm doing all kinds of other stuff other than CrossFit. So,
like how to grow a mustache?
Yeah, how to grow a mustache is one of my specialties. No. Yeah, we're a traditional CrossFit gym. However, we do tons of one-on-ones, tons of PT, tons of small group specialties. We got people who do bodybuilding out of my gym. We've got people who do powerlifting. We've got Olympic weightlifters. We've got moms and 40-plus women, 50-plus women. So, like, I'm one of those CrossFit gyms that's the core of what we do, but we break the mold with a lot of other things, and we're pretty open-minded.
I love that. We're kind of in the same boat. We're starting to expand quite a bit outside of CrossFit. Not because we don't like CrossFit, but there's so many other people that need to be coached, and what we do best is coaching. So might as well help them.
Yeah, 100%. I agree.
So tell me, guys, what's something on your minds? Like, what's a hot topic that like has been bugging you lately in the fitness industry? Is like, is there something going around online, or
like
that
Derek
you could
squash something to throw out there?
If you could squash something that's going around online right now for all these like resolution chasers, what would you tell them to avoid?
Well, I mean, there's a few ways we could go with this. Like, I think one thing is that the boat's been rocking back and forth over the course of the last couple of decades, where the gym for the longest time was very much aesthetics focused, and then the niche was more of the functional side of things.
Yeah.
And then it kind of started to rock very aggressively in the other direction, to where it became almost impossible to define what functional fitness actually meant. And it became somewhat taboo for people to say, well, my goal is actually to look a certain way or build muscle in this way. And obviously there was still a large niche of people that were focused on those things, but functional fitness kind of like took the industry by storm. And now you're starting to see a bit of a leveling out, where it's starting to become a little bit less taboo to want to be able to look good and feel good and have programming and services that kind of are able to facilitate both of those things. And I think what really good gyms do is they're able to definitionally differentiate those things while also creating a mesh between them, right? So we've kind of, we're removing this like pie in the sky kind of or gray area where it's like, oh yeah, like if you just do pure CrossFit all the time, like you're going to look good, feel good, don't worry about it. Like just show up to class, right? And I think that that's true up to a point for people. But at a certain stage, people need something that is progressive and very goal oriented. And I think that to be in this game long term, you have to really hone in on that.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's specification that has to happen. Like they said in CrossFit, you got to go from sick to well. And then from well to, what was the last one? Fit. I think that bridge from well to fit requires specification that for a lot of people, generalized CrossFit is not going to do.
Yeah. I'd agree with you, you know, and like as somebody who owns a CrossFit gym, I just wrote an article on this. My gym does a lot of other things. So I'm going to pull from some of the notes on that I have on this. But I think when you go into a CrossFit gym and you do GPP, that's exactly what you get. You get a little bit fitter, you move a little bit better, your conditioning is improved, everyday life feels a little bit easier, but all that doesn't happen by accident. It's what good general training does for you. But once you start going and specifying to what you really want and diving into what people's goals really are, then you have to get specific. You have to really be able to give those people those options. And if you're not doing that as a gym, you're not doing that as an owner, you're doing your clients a disservice by not listening to them. Because if somebody comes to you and says, hey, my goal is to look better, but they're not looking better, maybe they are a little bit fitter, maybe those things have happened. However, if you're not listening to them, you just keep giving them the same thing over and over again, they're not going to progress. And then they're going to leave your gym and they're going to go do something else that's not prescribed by you, right? So if you want to have a healthy gym, you got to listen to your people, and you can make an impact on them in more ways than one.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to build off that and kind of juxtapose a little bit, because like we talk about CrossFit as the GPP, but CrossFit isn't just GPP. What's the first 100 words of CrossFit?
Well, eat nut and seeds.
Yeah, meat and vegetables, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar. And not everyone realizes that like the basis of CrossFit is nutrition, right? And like I think all of us have nutrition services based into what we do. Because like in order for them to see results, nutrition has to be a part of that thing. So like, the methodology works, and I think all the methodologies work. Just depends on where you fall in terms of that. Because if you don't have nutrition coupled with that thing, you're gonna be it's a long road versus going just training.
For sure. I do want to talk methodology, but I want for the second I want to linger on the goal setting portion of this, because getting someone to decide on their goals is a skill set in and of itself.
Yeah.
And a lot of people's goals, first off, there are some insecurities you have to peel back the onion on. But most people's goals are also just mimetic desires. So it's like they go to a gym, they don't know.
What does that even mean?
Mimetic desire. So it's kind of like
Don't worry, I'm looking it up.
a mimetic desire is basically like you want what other people want.
Okay.
Right? So when they step foot in a gym, a lot of people they're somewhat goalless, and they have a lot of insecurities and things that guard what their true goals are. So in other words, they'll say things like, they'll use the buzzword. So it's like, I just want to lose weight.
I want to be healthy.
I want to be healthy.
I fucking hate
right?
that.
And it's
like, what does that mean?
There's a skill set that allows you to actually peel the onion back and get to the core of what they want, which is like, I'm so fucking sick and tired of getting out of bed and my knees are bothering me to the point that I can't play with my kids the way I
True
want to,
pain
right?
point, as you'd say.
Yeah. So
I think that's what we do in my gym very well, is we are able to kind of make a connection with people, build off of what they've learned by doing GPP workouts in CrossFit, and kind of take them to the next level of like, what do you actually want here?
Yep.
Now that you've got the taste for moving a little bit, maybe you move a little bit better, maybe you feel a bit better. Now that opens up a whole other world to people of like, well, now I want to go do X, Y, Z. I want to go climb a mountain. I want to do bodybuilding. I want to, try something different.
You got it. And what I have found happens a lot, and this is again the difference in the methodology, which I think the CrossFit methodology is amazing, versus the application of it, which is if you don't do the diligence of actually getting to the core of what people actually want, what you end up with is they sign up at the gym, and what they actually want is to be, reduce a lot of their pain and just to let's say be able to play with their kids effectively without feeling out of shape, or being able to not have to wear a shirt on the beach. But because of what everyone else wants at the gym, now they want to PR their snatch. But that's actually not what they're there for, right? And I think that's what happened for a lot of people in these large group settings, is if they weren't doing the diligence of getting to the core of what people actually wanted, people got roped into a bunch of goals that weren't actually theirs.
Yeah. And I think it's so important for if it's somebody doing a goal review or chatting with the member, like, you have to be able to read in between those lines. Because ultimately, like, those people, like, just like the ones that say, hey, I want to be healthy, like, that's not what they really want, right? Like, and it's bullshit. Because they read it somewhere and their doctor told them they need to get healthy. I'm like, well, what does it mean? You're like, well, I want you to drop the weight. Okay, well, how much weight? Well, what does that actually look like? And
well, the reality is, like, think about how much time does the average person spend at our gyms? Like, we're talking like 3 hours a week, realistically.
Yeah, probably 3 to 6 hours a week, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Right, but the average person's probably not spending 6 hours, right? So let's assume it's like 3 hours, right? Everything that they come in and do, there's an opportunity cost to it. So if they come in and they have a workout and it's 21-15-9 snatches and let's say it's like 4-3-2 rope climbs, and it's like that's how they spent their hour. We're not saying there's something inherently wrong with either of those movements or the combination of them, the speed that they're doing them, the intensity. But if that is not in alignment to help them incrementally progress towards their goal or the outcome they're looking for, it is a waste of their time, right? And I think that's, for me, where I think the methodology and the application of it kind of begin to separate, is when we're chucking everyone into this and it's going to just encompass all goals if you show up enough. And that's where I fundamentally disagree. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So, like, like you could take a CrossFit athlete, right? Or gym member.
Yeah.
In this, we call them CrossFit athletes, but like, not everybody's an athlete. We'll call them gym members, right? If you take their general training and you expand on, okay, what does a general program not do? Doesn't address their specific skill gaps, their weaknesses, and you can argue the universal scalability of it. But if somebody has an injury, like, chances are they're not going to show up and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to scale all this. Like, that's just the reality of it. Like, you can universally scale things and adapt things, but I think that's where you really need to take somebody and be like, all right, let's take you and look at what we can specifically do, even in the CrossFit world, whether that goal is to just get better at CrossFit or to do something different. But if you take a specific program, you can train their weaknesses, their skill gaps, their mobility limitations, their recovery capacity, and their lifestyle, and you can help them progress across the board in that general way, right? And then if you really want to dive into it more, if that person has a specific goal, if somebody wants to be a bodybuilder, they're not going to do that in a CrossFit class, right? They can maybe add some conditioning to it, or whatever can be part of it, but like, you really need to, like, you do a lot of bodybuilding work right now, right? Like, I don't see you reaching your bodybuilding goals in that large group setting in a group class. Like, it's just, you have to get more specific.
Well, and part of that, to be fair, is like, and we talked about this last night, like, yes, there's a GPP component for just about everybody that is getting their foot in the door, right? And we can talk about like how to effectively scale for them, ensure they're not going to get hurt, increase effectiveness, like all that stuff. But with, like, for me, my training age, like, I have been at this for 20 years now, right? I started lifting consistently when I was 15 years old. I can't juggle 3 pins at once thinking that I'm going to make one of them better, right? And I think that there's a large subset of people that are going to gyms now that are falling more and more into that category. So yeah, in my particular case, yeah, I have to be much more specific. It's harder to move the needle. The same as it would for somebody that's like, if they want to go and compete in Olympic lifting, like, this is going to have to be something that you focus on exclusively, or to the exclusion of these other things. But I will say that where I think CrossFit really, really does hit the mark is that is not an excuse for neglecting things to the point that you lose the capacity entirely.
Correct.
So, for instance, like, I think that a bodybuilder should still be able to perform an overhead squat effectively, because to me, that is a good indication of just global function and joint health for the long term, right? And you could argue, for the sustainability of their quote unquote bodybuilding career, whether that's for fun or for sport. And the same would be true for CrossFit athletes. Like, I think a CrossFit athlete should be able to do effectively like a bodybuilding phase and be able to control, or include tempo into what they're doing, like to be able to have better neuromuscular connection, and to be able to activate their smaller, like secondary, tertiary muscles as part of, doing their movements. Like, I think there's this element to where like you should be able to almost treat these different methodologies as the same way you would sports, in that like you should be able to kind of jump into each one of them and play, if you will, and do it fairly well.
I'm a big believer that, like, one of the reasons why I love CrossFit so much and why I participate in it, because it's open-ended, right? It borrows from so many different methodologies. You're going to see elements of gymnastics, powerlifting, and Olympic weightlifting. And I think for a long time, there was a lot of negative shadow cast on the idea that you can work in aesthetics as well. So, like, in my gym, we program a lot of that accessory work, a lot of aesthetics pieces, because that's part of most people's goal when they come into a general program, is like they want to feel better, they want to look better, they want to perform better. And so I think that when we forget about that piece of the aesthetic portion of it, like, most people won't, when they come to a gym, want to look a little bit better. I mean, I think all you guys would agree with that. If there's people that come into your gym, they're, and then you can tell them, yeah, I can help you look better. They're not going to be like, oh, please don't,
Yeah, I do think, though, like when you chase performance, you end up usually at a certain point, like if you're going to chase performance, get better performance, the aesthetics have to change, right? Like you can't PR Fran and be, 100 pounds overweight. It doesn't work. Right. And so, like, at a certain point, like, the performance does have a play, but I do understand the definition of helping people focus and recalibrate those things, since it's a faster path. I do find that some people, when they chase performance, they end up staying on board longer, because it's actually like that kind of like game of points and times and scores. So they're actually engaged more. Because like if you just give them the boring shtick of like, hey, we're going to do these, they could do that at Gold's Gym.
Sure.
So like ultimately it's the coaching at most of the facilities, regardless of the methodology, whether it's CrossFit, whether it's semi-privates, whether it's one-on-ones, they all work. It's just a matter of like what's going to get them there the best. And I think that, like, at least in our facility, people go through PT, semis, and then it's the lowest hanging fruit if it fits the goal or it fits their budget. And they understand that it's going to take them longer to get there with classes than it is with semis or PTs. Yeah. So like, and I think that's like a comment. It's unfair to group all CrossFit gyms in that category, because
sure.
we don't fit that mold.
Well, and that's why, like, I mentioned yesterday, we were talking about kind of, well, what's under the, what is the greatest volume under the bell curve here, right? And I would argue that, and I could make this argument for just about any gym that's based on a specific methodology, like the bulk of them are not performing optimally.
Like humans or like gyms?
No, the gym. So like if you were to look at the average CrossFit gym right now and you go pull up their Instagram and look at, let's say, like their the highlight reels of all their members moving, right? It would be very easy for us, right? People that have been in this game for a long time to go, that person probably shouldn't be doing that. This person probably shouldn't be doing this, right? And this is kind of gets to the crux of where I take issue with this, is that what you end up with is, I'm cool with the performance side of things. That does not give you the pass go card to skip things that should be prerequisites to the things that you want to do.
Oh yeah, for sure. So like, if we're not the average gyms. Like, we've been doing this for a long time, and I think there's an understanding here of, like, my gym, you're not going to see that. I know in your gym you're not going to see that. I know in your gym you're not going to see that. I know in your gym you're not going to see that. But I think that part of why I like talking about stuff like this is hopefully somebody sees it and understands that maybe they should progress their gym a little bit differently, or maybe they should think about how A doesn't always equal B, doesn't always equal C. Maybe we should stay on A for a little while longer, or if we're going to F from A, we should skip a bunch of steps in between. You know what I'm saying? So I definitely would agree with that sentiment. Like, I think there's a purpose, and if you never make it to F, okay, then maybe we'll be over here for a little while, or maybe that's a long-term goal. But I think there's a little more time that needs to be spent on a lot of basic rudimentary movement.
Yeah, and there's just certain things, coming from an Olympic lifting background, like to me, if you have someone snatching 2-3 times a month, they're nowhere near ready to try to max out their snatch.
No.
Right. And you, right. And like, so like that is a movement. That is, I would say kind of similar to like, let's say it's like Formula One racing. Like there's a lot of freaking steps you got to get before you're on the track at full speed. And I feel like sometimes because of the nature of how these gyms operate, it's like people get in, they're super excited, they perform like the half-assed version of the movement and they don't kill themselves. And then it's like, okay, cool, 3, 2, 1, like we're rolling. And that there to me, it's again, that opportunity cost piece, but it's also that risk to reward profile. And we talked about how like a lot of this comes down to the ability of the coaches, and that's more challenging the greater the ratio is. So if it's like, you can have a great coach and 20 people, and this becomes astronomically harder to scale that many people effectively without the scaling becoming the major part of the class. Does that make sense? Like, in other words, like you end up spending an inordinate amount of time having to do that if there's not already some prerequisites already built in for those people. And a lot of this is a culture piece, like you set the tone at your gym. But look, one thing I want to say here is that like we've all learned these lessons because we've been in the game long enough to have made the mistakes. Right? Like,
or seen it somewhere else and go, fuck, not doing that.
That too. Like I look back at programming that I wrote 10 years ago and I'm appalled. Like the amount of just volume I would throw at people and like the absence of a lot of these prerequisites before people were able to, they had to demonstrate they could do something effectively and well consistently before, testing it at higher intensities and loads. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to come off as like holier than thou with this because for me, at least personally, like we've been through the bad side of this.
Well, and I also think that like part of it is the responsibility of the gym, the coaches and the gym owner, but like a big part of this is the responsibility of the fucking athlete. Like you're the one loading up the bar. You're the one that is stepping like up to that barbell. You're the one that is moving that weight. You need to move weight that is safe. And I can't tell you how many times we've said, hey, like that looks pretty good. And people go, I'm going to add 10 more pounds. I'm like, dude, we watch this all day long. And like people are like, no, it feels good. I can do more. And you're like, dude, like I can tell you it needs to be fixed and it should look better. So like at a certain point, like I feel like part of it's culture, but part of it's like you got to give the athlete the responsibility to make that decision, and they have to be responsible for that piece, and that has to be communicated. And like I feel like a lot of times that isn't communicated in onboarding, it isn't communicated at whiteboard, it isn't communicated while they're doing the lift. So like if it is negligible, I get that from some gyms, but like for the most part, if you reiterate that to people, like they're gonna make their own decision whether they want to or not sometimes. You can strip the weight off the bar, but not everyone's comfortable doing that at that level. Like I have great coaches in my facility. Some of them do not feel comfortable doing that. And like that's just because some of the athletes are really hard to coach sometimes.
No, for sure. And that is always, you're always going to have egotistical people that are going to want to push harder than they want to.
Oh, totally. I mean, that's a great point. And this is to both of you. Like where we went last night, like there was plenty of ego lifting in that gym we went to last night. It's like,
what? No way.
And like there's guys half rep and stuff and using dumbbells that they had no business touching. So it's not like it's not unique to a CrossFit gym in that way. It's just more exposed because it's a group setting.
One point I want to make though is the key difference between the two things there is that the risk to them is they just don't get the results that they want. The risk in the setting where you have someone who can't touch their fucking feet and they're snatching at maximal load is very different. Those are two different risks.
Yeah, the end result is very, very, very different.
How many people have you seen injured from a snatch in your gym? I'm just curious.
Other than myself?
Very few.
Yeah.
Very few.
Yeah, I mean, like most of the injuries are like somebody picked up a barbell and their back goes in the spasm. It's like odd shit.
So it's less from my gym and it's more people that come to me now having been banged up from doing CrossFit a certain way for a certain amount of time and are like, oh, I've got, a double slap tear. And I'm like, how'd that happen? And they're like, oh, I was like attempting a kipping pull-up in a competition. And, you're like, okay, show me a strict pull-up. And they can barely do 1.5. And you're like, who the fuck was letting you do this?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's where a lot of those things come from, whether it be snatching, pull-ups, kipping variation, whatever.
Yeah, but I think a lot of those too like differ, and this is where I think CrossFit's matured since. I mean, I started CrossFit in 06, right? So like it started off as a sport, and like everyone was doing the sport. And then at a certain point, it's like, hey, there's two ways here. There's the health side of things where you're going to take way less risk. Like when we talk about a 1 rep max in class, it's like a sub maximal load. You're in it. You understand that you're here for health. The other part, which is the competitive side, which is again, like people are competing, but in any sport, when you compete, there's a chance of getting hurt. Football, basketball, baseball, doesn't matter what it is. And I feel like most people, at least in our facility, 98% of people are doing CrossFit for health, not for sport. And that's where it's really evolved in the last decade, and people understanding that, and affiliate owners understanding.
You mentioned earlier, like people chasing performance, and like that's depends on the avatar of that person. It depends on how their mindset is. So like you can show somebody you've made progress with numbers in your tracking software and your sugar watt or whatever it is that you use beyond the whiteboard, and those are things that we want to think about. Like maybe, but not everybody responds well to those. You got some people that are going to respond better to seeing, results in the mirror. I'm somebody who likes seeing results performance-based. Like I like being able to go out and do things myself. And I think a lot of people respond better that way because there's no like negative connotation with the scale or whatever else it is. But I think that there also are the people that are going to respond to performance in that way too, where they're going to chase that performance and chase it when they shouldn't be. Right. And that's where it's the responsibility of the facility, the coach, and, every layer of your onboarding and all those other things to make sure that you're instilling a process that doesn't promote that and doesn't promote like ego lifting or anything that's going to cause somebody to get an injury. And you're never going to eliminate all of it. It's impossible, but you are talking about compound movements that prevent a higher risk. And I think if you need to, as a responsible party taking care of these people, you need to present that to people. Like this is a snatch. This is an Olympic lift where there are demonstrable risks involved with it, just like anything else. And if that's not something you're willing to do, maybe do something different.
No, and I don't want to come off by any means as someone who wants to instill fear around these specific movements with people. It is, to me, the skipping of steps to allow people to get there just because they want to feel like they're part of the class when there's a million and one things they should have done getting there. And like, I want to make a point to kind of like, to get back to the roots of CrossFit, which is, I mentioned earlier about how like to me, the crux of this is the difference between the application and the methodology. And when there was the craze around the games and the performance side of this, if you were to take main site programming and make most gyms do it, they would have fucking hated it. Because it would be like the entire day would be 5x3 back squat or a very long swim or a bunch of isometric work. Like there was a workout, I'll never forget this. This is like when we were in our heyday, teams going to regionals, like our open was a huge fucking deal. We had a workout and it was like a 20-minute AMRAP. It was a main site workout. It was a 20-minute AMRAP and it was like chin over bar 30 seconds, like push up plank hold 30 seconds. And it was like L-sit hold 30 seconds and then some other form, maybe like a handstand hold or something, like 30 seconds. And all of our members were like, this is the most boring shit I've ever done, right? And to me, the light bulb that went off was like, main site programs this stuff for a reason, right? And while it's boring, it acted as a break from like the super high intense, like 21-15-9 style of CrossFit-esque workouts, the quote unquote, the typical Metcon conditioning, right? Or metabolic conditioning. And it had that 3-on 1-off structure. And at least one of those days would look like the workout that I just brought up. And like most CrossFit gyms weren't putting that stuff in. It was like Metcon, maybe a day off, right? And then Metcon, maybe a day off. And I think that's, again, where the original methodology did not look like that.
And I think it's cool, but we follow CAP. I don't know what you follow. What do you follow?
I write my own program.
Okay, so like we follow CAP and I make some tweaks to it. But like, dude, they do a really nice job of like RPE, making adjustments, different body weight stuff, different volumes.
You're going to see RPE in my gym. You're going to see tempo work.
Yeah.
You're going to see accessories. You're going to see bodybuilding, pieces of bodybuilding.
Absolutely.
You're going to see all kinds of like, you're going to see conjugate method style programming.
I love like conjugate stuff and like Wendler stuff, like all that stuff. It's great.
And I think the framework. So the way I write programming is like I build a framework of where I'd like to see people going. I analyze data too. I look at like we use Sugar Watt to track in my gym. So I look at like okay, what's the average person doing? Where are we? Like what are we going to be seeing for trends as far as where people are, and how can I help them get fitter? How can I help them get better? So, like, I do believe in progressive overload. You can do that in a CrossFit setting. Like, if you're going to come to my gym, you're probably going to squat on a Monday. Like, that's just how it is. But we're going to vary some conditioning, but I want to make sure that we're hitting different types of conditioning, right? And that's not always going to be a 20-minute AMRAP. It's not always going to be, a 5-minute burner. You know what I mean? I want to make sure that I think different conditioning. And we do zone 2 work, a lot of it. And it's a program day where I put in functional bodybuilding along with that zone 2 work, and I make that part of it. So like when I do zone 2 work, it's not always like sit on a rower for 30 minutes. It's like move for 30 minutes and keep your heart rate in the zone, and that can include bodybuilding.
One of the key concepts that we really try to teach the members is I want them to understand the relationship between like stimulus and feeling. Yeah. So it's like this is the stimulus of this workout, right? Based on this energy system, this is how you should feel, and this should be your limiter. So in other words, like if we have a workout that's aerobic endurance, and you're sprinting your first 400-meter run, and your limiter is now the burn in your legs or your power output, you're missing the fucking mark here, right? And it's the more I can kind of corral people into that and help them understand this is how I should feel in this workout. If this is happening, I'm going too fast. If this is happening, I'm going too slow. And you allow for progression within the things that you're doing. So there is more of this, hey, I can expect that on Mondays we're squatting. And oh, by the way, I'm either going to go up in reps or up in load next week. There's going to be some form of a deload incorporated into this. Oh, by the way, I have a baseline that we tested and we're going to retest this, right? That progression in and of itself is something that is so important to what we do. Yeah.
I concur.
yeah.
I mean, I think that's a great point to kind of set this thing up, dude. Like you guys kind of crushed it with some amazing content.
I mean, how many gyms out there aren't doing setting those expectations at the whiteboard? How many coaches in the average CrossFit gym that you go to are going through like, hey, this is the Metcon today. Guys, I want this to be crispy and smooth. You should be working at a constant heart rate the whole time. You shouldn't be sprinting out of the gate on this. You should not fail any reps. Or these should be touch and go reps. You know, like how many coaches are actually whiteboarding and understanding how people should be performing in each workout?
And that's to that point, that's why I enjoy some of these outsourced programs, because they offer all that like a lot of gyms aren't built to understand, but should be teaching, and it's in their coaching development and progressions. And if you're a gym that's writing your own program, but you're not doing that, whether because you don't have time or you can't think of everything, those outsourced programs have a lot of great things in that regard in terms of like professionalizing the experience, in terms of making sure you understand what's the stimulus, what's the, what are we looking for here? What's the coaching highlight? Like what are some, different things we should be highlighting to make sure that every level of member in your class has that target.
Yep. And how does this fit into the rest of the week? How does this fit into this mesocycle? And how does this fit into your goals?
I think that's the key.
Yeah.
And like it's not only has to be explained, but like actually has to be executed. Right. And like I feel like at least within the CrossFit realm, you can tweak every workout to match performance, to match a community vibe, and to match weight loss for most workouts, minus like a heavy 5x5. Like you can test it in ratio to your weight, right? But like if we were to, let's just say, attack a triplet, right? Toes to bar, we'll say a row, we'll say like a power clean and jerk at 135. For a competitor, it might be you're going to attack it this way. For weight loss, it might be weight is dropped way down so you can achieve consistent movement for the most reps. And instead of toe to bar, it's knees to chest or sit-ups, right? And then for the community piece is, hey, you're going to do it with a partner. You guys got to switch on and off every single round. So essentially it's the same workout. You're just scaling it to get where you need to be for whatever that result looks like.
Yeah. One of the things that I feel CrossFit 100% got right, and which speaks to why they so many people that did get involved with it, especially early on, saw some pretty radical changes with their body, was that so few people were ever exposed to real intensity. The thing that
I'm so glad we're talking about intensity. I'm so excited to chat about that next piece.
Where I think that it started to go the wrong direction is that coaches that don't understand how to actually create and promote real intensity, they try to fabricate it through volume. So in other words, it's like,
very true.
Rather than actually get this person to push within 2 reps in reserve on this set of 10 back squats, I'm just going to make them do 10 sets of 10 with a lighter bar and be exhausted and have terribly sore legs tomorrow. Right? But my point is when you do that day in and day out, what you're doing actually is you're degrading intensity, because not only are people not having adequate rest periods between things that should be really fucking hard and intense enough to where they have to sit their ass down for 3+ minutes at a time, but you're also eating away at their connective tissue, their recovery for the next day, glycogen depletion, right, and storage. And now what you end up with is a shell of people that are just metconning themselves to death day after day. And I think reintroducing real intensity back into our classes is kind of one of the core concepts that allows people to see some of the progress in the areas that we were talking about.
So do you guys feel like core group classes are still a benefit to the health and wellness of the average person?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So there's no argument that some sort of core class, but meeting criteria that's been mentioned, good quality coaching, targeted, movement patterns, and highlighting specific things we're looking to accomplish. One of the things I love about NC Fit for all the years we were with them was they had 6 different versions of a movement, right? If it's a muscle up for the most experienced, they had variations all the way down the list to make sure everyone was challenged regardless of where you were at in your journey.
Well, and I think there's 2 things with this, right? So I think one, the path to ascension is provided through the CrossFit methodology, which keeps people engaged. The other part of this, CrossFit started the intensity movement, but then it was bastardized by everybody else. You got F45, intensity, Gold Gym classes, intensity, Orange Theory, and everyone just loaded. If you go to any other sport, it's all intensity, and there's no understanding that it's relative. And what I've
but a lot of those are
it's pseudo.
Intensity.
But what I've noticed it's coming full circle now, where people are self-regulating some of that intensity, and that's where we see the more introduction of more semis, more PTs, because people can't run the class model, the intensity all day long and expect it to get results. They need to give themselves that other alternative, because sometimes 1, people don't do it themselves, but 2, it's been so highlighted from everybody else, they don't know where else to find it.
No, that's a good point. And to piggyback on that, one of the things that I have found, and I really preach in our coaching development, is that the best way to be able to get people to actually perform at high intensities is to simplify as much as possible or as needed for that individual. So I'll give you a for instance, if you have somebody who is still learning their basic squat mechanics, if I want them to reach maximal intensity, right, for that particular movement, let's say that we're trying, in this case, trying to really isolate their quads and their glutes for the squat, right?
For a bigger butt.
Bigger ass, baby.
That's it.
Yeah, the primary mover, the mitochondria. I'm going to probably give them a kettlebell, put them in a goblet position, maybe raise their heels if they're not falling into the greatest of positions. And I am going to be there with them to keep them in the best position possible and take them to between 1 and 3 reps in reserve. What I am not going to do is make them do squat clean thrusters after doing a bunch of box jumps and burpees. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The more you throw complexity at somebody, the less likely they are to truly take something to a high intensity. They're more likely to be limited by the complexity of the movement or the workout.
Sure, and if you look at metabolic pathways, okay, so if you want true intensity and a all-out effort, and you want somebody burning, you got to make sure that they can actually perform the movement and do it well for that intense period. You know what I'm saying? If they're not going to perform a clean and jerk well, or a squat well, maybe it needs to be scaled to something that they can get that same stimulus out of and deliver that energy system that you're trying to train. And that
Yeah, and to your point, right? Like it is energy system dependent. Like intensity is relative to the energy system that you're training, or I should say, it's specific to the energy system you're training. Like if you're trying to do something that's like purely anaerobic power based, there are certain things and exercises you're just not going to get from A to B.
right.
Right. Like you're probably not doing like
Turkish get up.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then, but on the opposite side too, like you're probably like the clean and jerk at moderate loads is probably not the best tool for anaerobic endurance or aerobic endurance.
But you can produce that similar effort with a couple of dumbbells and maybe some step ups, and with getting the right heart rate, in that heart rate zone or whatever you're trying to achieve. There's ways to incorporate some of those things where you can kind of achieve something similar without going over the top with technicality. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you can take relatively simplified movements and put them into some sort of a circuit base and get people to move as well as they possibly can. And I don't want to be like rep police over here and say like, well, if it's not perfect, then like there's no sense in doing it.
Right.
I'd hire you to come to my gym and do that.
When we talk about commoditized intensity, right? Like you were just saying, like your F45s, your Orange Series, like their whole thing is that like they're not going to push people into those different metabolic pathways after a certain point. Maybe when they first show up there and they're highly deconditioned,
Right.
They might be feeling that there, but they're gonna, if they stick with it and they actually stay doing these things over and over again, I think there's more opportunity to see improvement elsewhere.
Yeah, and the center of the bullseye becomes suffering and exhaustion. And for me, that is like the antithesis of what we're actually trying to get out of this. Like you're not going to get in great shape without having some level of suffering, right?
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be like the center of the bullseye for how you determine A, if you had a good workout, or B, if you're working towards your goals. And that's where like having something that's more strategic, progressive, to where and tied to their goals, I feel like it's just the responsibility of us and the other gym owners to like make that more of the forefront of what we're doing.
Do you guys feel like the evolution of the gym industry is moving towards semi-private like some believe, or is there space for all the facets we've known, right? The traditional gyms, the group gyms, semi-private, private, like, and some like us that maybe are a amalgamation of all of them.
I think it's you adapt or die, right? Like,
Right.
You're never gonna see group fitness go away because it's enjoyable. There's a lot of good things about group fitness, like it brings people together. We talk about like we're talking about the physical right now, but like, what does group fitness do really well, in my opinion? Well, it's really good at building communities. It's really good at helping people with their mental health. It's really good at bringing people together, right? So I don't think you're going to see it go away. I think what you are starting to see is some of that, some of those things break off, like gyms doing more semi-privates and more PTs and things like that, because it makes sense for the sustainability of the business.
That's what I was just about to say too. Yeah, like we have to remember that half of this equation is what is going to keep the gym in existence to be able to continually help people, right? And I think what gym owners found out that weren't in like heavy metropolitan areas that could have 350 and 400 members,
Right.
was that group is, unless you plan on being an owner operator the rest of your life and being tied to that gym, having a tough time taking vacations, God forbid your wife gets pregnant, you gotta take time off and you can't do it. Like that's not a sustainable business model for people that want to be able to have a life outside of their identity of being a gym owner. And I think the introduction of semi-private and PT to a degree was to be able to facilitate a staff that could come in and take ownership over some of the big responsibilities inside of the gym. And like there's client facing benefits to this too. It's not purely business, but there's interplay between those two things.
Yeah, my question was based on you got some top level programmers here. You guys are programming for different things. You're programming for group, you're programming for semi-private, private. is there a world where do you feel like, because I feel like group there's a cap. Financially, there's a cap. Obviously, it's easy to scale for programming because, you just fucking GPP a program. Here's some modifications. All right, have at it. But from a financial standpoint, I feel like group has a glass ceiling. Do you guys agree with that? Like,
depending on the market, yes. Yeah.
So, like, just in general, if you look at across the United States, like, or the world, there's a kind of a glass ceiling on it. And, the gyms that are really, really successful, ones that end up here, have branched off. They found other specialties, personal training, semi-private.
I think I'd be really hard pressed to find somebody in our group that's purely doing group. And if they are, like, I want to know how they're doing it.
Well, and it's certain markets. If you're in the middle of New York City, and you have
like a Barry's boot camp, you're fucking crushing.
Right. And you can pull that off because there's no shortage of people.
Yeah.
Right. And like, you're not overpriced. Like there's good market fit. You're going to be able to do that for a long time there. But as you get into the outskirts, no, like you have to offer different things. And look, there's the last point on this for me is there's also just generally higher churn with group, which is natural, a natural part of there's kind of this like diffusion effect that goes out. Like you can only have so many high quality relationships.
Yeah, and you can only have so much effect on people.
You think about so the way I look at like your example with the Barry's boot camp, they may be crushing it, but like who is working for them? Do they have full-time dedicated career coaches, or is this something they're going to constantly be having to like hire and fire? It's like I look at it as like the Aroma Joe. It was a coffee chain where I'm from called Aroma Joe's, and I'm always seeing different people in there. Like it's constantly turning over because the business is structured in a way where it's like there's a ceiling for the person, right? So like, I want career coaches in my gym. I don't want to have to constantly hire and fire and rehire and do all this stuff in my gym where it's like that fucking sucks. So like that's going to occupy the ownership and the management of that gym more than it is with career coaches. But I don't know, maybe those places have career coaches that are going to stick around. Are they going to get paid well? Is it going to be a career coaching at Barry's boot camp?
Yeah. One thing I say to my coaches pretty frequently is like, your value as a coach is determined by the complexity of the problems that you can solve, and your ability to solve complex problems is determined by my ability to keep you here, right? Because the longer that somebody is a full-time coach, the more time that they can pour into honing and developing their craft.
And also learning from experiences they see on the floor.
Yeah. And like without having options like personal training or semi-private, like that helps coaches develop themselves much more, right? Like that gives them the opportunity to tinker a little bit and hone in their skills, like you guys mentioned. And I don't think that's not a starting ground for most people. Like if you're going to go into, I think in the world that we live in, a lot of people start with group and go into personal training, which like traditionally, I think in this world, you start with personal training and go to
correct
because you hone your skills in as a one-on-one. You're dealing with
and then you're capable of going, So here's a question for you guys from a programming standpoint. If there's coaches watching this and they're like, man, I really want to get into private training, but I want to work with people that are like getting their health started and I want to like get into that world. Is there a time frame you would recommend? 30, 45, 50 an hour? Like what's the time frame from a programming standpoint if you're working with someone who's like general health or trying to get to that slightly above well? Is there like a particular time frame you're going, I need this for programming to make sure it's like you're going to get something out of it?
You mean in terms of the total time that they're willing to put in?
No, I'm saying like in terms of the session time. Like if you're programming for someone, like are you writing 45-minute programs? Are you writing 50 an hour? Because I see a lot of talk on that about like
it is goal dependent. It's dependent on their training age. It's depending on like like,
Their
there's-
physiological and mental and like their psychological capacity, like that's a big one.
Right, and that's why I asked, because you see so many people that are like, it's 60 or it's 45, like 30 is for no one, and I'm like, I don't agree with that.
I don't agree with that either. So like, if I got like a 65-year-old male who comes to me who has never trained in his life, we're gonna spend a lot more time on rudimentary basics. We're just gonna get him moving, right?
Right.
And I'm probably gonna spend a lot more time working with his mobility and getting him warmed up and feeling good about solid end range movement. Range of motion is going to be super important. We're going to spend a lot more time on that than we are actually applying external loads. And then we're going to build into that. And we're going to build in intensity. So to put like, oh, we can only do that in 60 minutes on it, like I don't agree.
I mean, it probably speaks more to the person and their abilities rather than ours, right? But like, this is great because like at the tennis club, right? Like my clients range from 27 up to 81. And like, dude, I got some people that are twice a week for 30 minutes. And like, it is life-changing for them to be held accountable for 30 minutes twice a week for them to go, hey, I can actually get down and I can paint my baseboard.
Yeah.
Hey, I got down and I played with my grandchild. Like that clearly is a result. Like it's not optimal, but guess what? It's progress in the right direction. Like what else are they going to do? Go to somebody else?
And going back to what you said earlier about performance, that's a performance right? So that performance doesn't always mean like I deadlifted more than I deadlifted a month ago. It could be I can get up off the ground and don't feel like shit anymore.
Right. Performance could be I picked up my 4-year-old grandchild.
Yes.
Well, and there's also there's anti-goals, right? There are things that you don't want to happen, and especially as people get older, that list grows longer and longer, right? Like
That's a
I
great
don't
point.
want to not be able to get out of a chair without grabbing onto something.
Like I don't want to be bound to a hospital bed when I'm 55 or younger. Like people are that's real. That really happens. Like I want to be 90 years old and hiking. Like that's me.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to give the other people that come to me the ability to do that and solve that problem before it becomes a problem for them.
Yeah, that was a big thing to me because, like, in CrossFit especially, like 30 minutes are looked at as skill sessions. And, like, everybody gets in their head, it's a skill session. Sure, for the 30-year-old engineer.
Yeah.
But for the 65-year-old grandma that just came in that can't keep up with her grandbabies, 30 minutes is a PT session.
Right. There's an element of setting of expectations here, right?
Yeah.
Like if someone's signing up, if you have a 33-year-old mom that's signing up for 2 days, 30 minutes, one, I think you have to make sure she appreciates that she's still carving this time out for herself.
Right.
And that's really, it's important that you're here, even though you may not be getting the results as fast as you would like them right now. You're keeping the habit alive,
100%.
which, depending on where you are in your season of life, could be the most important thing that you're doing.
Yep.
Right?
Could just be the start of something that will progress into
But
something
at the
much
same
deeper.
point, if she came to me and said, well, I want to lose, 30 pounds in the next 2 months, and I want to be able to take my squat from this to this, I'd be like, whoa. Like, you know what I mean?
We're
Like,
gonna need a lot more than that.
Yeah.
Let's break it down. How fast do you expect that to actually happen? They're like, let's do the math on it.
I mean, like you look how some of this stuff's progressed too. Like I can think back to like times where it was like, man, I got a one-on-one today. I'm gonna slaughter them. Like, why would somebody think that? Like, and that's good business practice. Like, if you take your 45-year-old mom and you absolutely wreck her in 30 minutes, and then you're like, you want to book another session? And she's like, no, I don't want to ever do this again.
Yeah.
So like,
sometimes that's just a lack of appreciation for, like, for instance, if you have like a trainer or coach that's in their mid-20s and they don't know what it's like to have a kid waking up 3 times throughout the night, and you've got work stress, and like this whole parenting thing is new to you, and like you've got God knows what else going on in your life, like your capacity and recovery going into those sessions is unfathomable to a 25-year-old coach.
I can remember that one massive mistake I made with a client one time. I was working with this lady, and she was like a mid-40s woman, and she loved training at my gym. And like I had a day where I was just like not having it, and she wasn't performing how I normally would see her perform. And I was getting frustrated because I wanted to see her do better. I wanted her to be able to have this, this epiphany in this workout or whatever. And I remember I looked at her and I said, "You're pathetic today." And I was like, oh my Christ. I said that to her, and I'm probably never going to see her again. She stuck around for a little while, but I had to like apologize to her and be like, this was me coming out. I was projecting my thoughts at the time onto her of like how she was performing, and I didn't get on her level as a trainer that day, and I was like trying to push her too hard. I had these expectations of her as a coach that were irrational for that day and unreasonable, and it came out as completely in the wrong way. Like I would be horrified if somebody said that in my gym now. If one of my coaches did that, they'd be hearing it from me.
We've all had.
But like to this day I can't believe I did that, and like it was such a massive mistake, but I also learned so much from that. So it was valuable in that regard, but it was so embarrassing at the time. It was so the wrong thing to do. Like, and if you look at it, like everything we've talked about can be boiled down to something like that. You can say like, man, like all these things that I've learned over the years as a coach and as a trainer and as a gym owner, like I've maybe made some mistakes. And I think that some of the things where you're getting your rationale and all the things you had to say from is that you've maybe seen these mistakes happen or, done them yourself. And now you're seeing, how do we make the industry better as a whole? How do we project in our own businesses and get this message out to other people?
Well, and I think one of the biggest things too is like the goal is, and we all realize this, right? And we preach this to our coaches. The goal is to build confidence in our athletes so they want to come back, right? And like we do that with our staff, or like our staff wants to come back, and hopefully they do the same thing with the members. And like I can't tell you how many times like that isn't accounted for in other facilities sometimes. Yeah. To like again like let people have enough fun. Like some of those side conversations that happen in classes, like they're gonna happen. Like those sort of things where like they're distracting us in a group setting. Like that ability to like teach somebody that it's okay and that they're learning and growing, but get them to want to come back. Like that's the ultimate. I think that's one of the best measures of being a great coach and a great mentor.
Yeah. Well, imagine like somebody like now these days, and like back in the day when gyms were like functional fitness gyms or CrossFit gyms were newer. When somebody showed up late. And you were like, oh, you got to do some penalty burpees, and call them out and how embarrassing that was for people. And like I hate that shit. It's like shaming somebody. They're here. They're spending their time with you. They're spending money to come into your gym and to have a good experience. And you're going to be like, shame on you for being late. Thanks for showing up. Like you should be like, oh, dude, I'm so glad you're here. Yeah. Versus like, oh, you're not here when I said it was okay to be here. And that shit.
I mean, everything that we've discussed is all in service of creating more adherence for people.
Yeah.
Right? Like we measure leg or length of engagement for business purposes, but that's also a great indicator as far as the effectiveness of your gym.
Yeah.
Because if people aren't sticking around, it is incredibly rare that people leave your gym just to go find another gym. Yeah. There are a lot of people that leave gyms to stop going to the gym, right? And this is, I mean, we don't need to go down this rabbit hole, but like even in the sales room when we're having those consultations with people, I will tell people like, if you don't sign up here, I know there's a very good chance you're not going to sign up anywhere, right?
you're not going to pull the trigger,
right? And like so, but back to the point about the adherence, like this is in part we talked a lot about the science behind what we do on the programming and the application of it on that front, but the art side of this is like it's how do you weave fun, right, and understanding and community and those sort of things into the fold as well to keep people coming back. Like this can't run like a research lab, as much as at times I would love to do that.
That's where I get my peptides
nerd myself. That would be fun. And obviously you would get the best results the quickest, but these are humans, they're not robots.